Okay. So, let's see if that's ministering to families in crisis. Let's just look at the family in Canada for a few moments, shall we? We see statistically that there's 47% of our families are blended families, 27% are traditional nuclear families, 14.5 are lone parent families, and then you have common law families that are 11.5. 60% of all remarriages eventually end in legal divorce. Okay? Untold others will experience emotional divorce and unsatisfying relationships. Approximately 75% of divorced persons eventually remarry. Okay, so remarriage is happening, divorce is happening, and along with that, a lot of crisis. Approximately 43% of all marriages are remarriages for at least one of the adults. Approximately 65% of remarriages involve children from the prior marriage and form blended families. By these statistics, we see that a majority of children are being raised in blended families. Presently, the number of homeless students is on the rise, so schools have become more of a safety net. In addition to free meals, some schools now offer free backpacks, clothes, and extra tutoring. The schools are becoming extended family type situations. 500,000 school-aged children were asked the question, what is more important, your TV or a father? And over half chose TV. So we're living in a culture where the family context is just in crisis, period. Crisis comes in a variety of degrees. The last 2 weeks, many families in the Abbotsford area were in crisis. And why do you think they'd be in crisis? Because of the gangs, there was that definitely going on. But even at a more remedial level, it was spring break. 2 weeks at spring break. Of spring break in Abbotsford. Like in Langley, there's only 1 week, right? So churches were kicking into gear, offering DBBS, morning programs, afternoon programs, night programs, just to help these parents that were in crisis. We all got back to school this week, and you should have seen the mothers. They were just ragged. You know, they're walking down the street, and they're going, or walking down the side of the sidewalk. They're like, how is yours? I don't know, how is your mom? You know, it was just like there's that type of crisis. And then there's the types of crisis that really ravage all of us, and that is, you know, when the death of a mother happens or the death of a father happens or an accident within the family. Like we have all heard about, you know, accidents that happen and the mother dies and the father still lives, or one of the children die, or there's been a miscarriage or a sudden death with an infant. Like there's those types of crises. There's just a variety of different things that can happen within the family context. Hopefully today I can give you some skills to be a good first responder and a good caregiver within these types of scenarios. Let's first of all look at what is a crisis. Okay? The crisis defined is a crucial time and a turning point in the course of anything. Okay? The term is often used for a person's internal reaction to an external hazard. It is an upset in a person's baseline level of functioning. It is a disruption of the balance in his or her life. Anxiety, depression, tension typically increase. If a person effectively copes with a threat, he or she then can return to the prior levels of their functioning. And typically, this isn't in your notes, but typically a crisis lasts about 6 weeks. If a crisis lasts more than 6 weeks, it then begins to turn into more like a traumatic event. It's much harder to recover from, and it gets into a different category. The potential for crisis is all around us, and you see this quote by Dr. Norman Wright. There's no limit to the number of losses and crises that occur in life. And then it just gives an overview of just the myriad of stuff that we know. We brush shoulders with people all the time where either the wife has been diagnosed with breast cancer, or the man's been diagnosed with prostate cancer, or the biological dad wants greater custody rights than the biological mom wants to give, or there's a fighting with the step-parent, or we find out that the step-parent has molested the child. There's just a variety of different things. When working with families in crisis, our initial response is very important. What you say to the person in crisis or to traumatized people can calm and lower their blood pressure, or it can increase their anxiety. Okay? Often people come to us in crisis, and we are the first response caregivers to their need. First responders have a very important job. According to two individuals, and these people work with individuals that are in crisis from crime. Their names are Morton Bard and Don Sandry. They say minutes of skillful support by any sensitive person immediately after the crisis can be worth more than hours of professional counseling later. In other words, individuals who utilize crisis intervention skills can help people reconstruct their lives and reduce the need for longer-term psychological help. So that's us, right? The ability to listen, the ability to normalize what the person's gone through and help them understand that they're no longer in that crisis and in a place of security, the ability to help them to build a support network, to help them calm down after the crisis. All these things can really lessen the amount of trauma that they experience after a crisis, and especially within the family context. Underlying a crisis is a loss of some kind, okay? When you talk about crisis, you always have to talk about loss. Crisis happens because someone is losing something that they value, okay? So things that precipitate a crisis might not necessarily be a bad thing. Like sometimes we get that confused. Like I think about a crisis that my husband and I had where the church was really there to be helpful, and that was the birth of our one and only son. Okay, we got one child. Okay, that was such a crisis event for us, and the church did what the church, they were just fantastic. There were meals there every day for 7 days. There were gifts. There were phone calls, limited phone calls, once a day, okay? And they were a real source of strength for us during that crisis. So crisis isn't necessarily bad stuff. It's stuff that just sets the equilibrium off. It's stuff that people aren't ready for, okay? Like there's one thing that they say about when you're ministering to people in crisis, and that is the best thing you can do is give them their sense of control back, okay? One of the best things you can do is give them their sense of control back, because what happens when they sense a loss or that they don't know what to do because of, say, the birth of a new child, is you give them the support that they need to get back on track, to find that baseline of operation again, to find that place where they can feel normal again. Part of when we look at crisis, listening is the key. Okay, listening is the key. Listening, what does this person need, and how can I provide it? Or how can I set the church, how can I prepare the church to go and give them what it is that they need? Like I teach a marriage and family class, and a couple of the people in the class did a presentation on divorce, and another set of the students did one on blended families, step-parenting. Well, the core thing, because the question that I asked them to answer is, how can the church help? Those are two crisis-oriented, potentially crisis-oriented situations. And it all came down to the following things. Be there financially, be there emotionally, and give them whatever it is that they need to create a family scenario that's normal. Okay, now that's a tall order, but it's actually a simple order. Because you look at any healthy functioning family, and you can see the criteria of what it is that this crisis family needs. When providing support, financial, practical, spiritual, is very important to help regaining or to help regain the control that is lost in a crisis. I have some notes here on blended families, and we're going to talk about blended families today. We're going to talk a little bit about divorced families. Due to time constraints, we can't get into everything, but there's a key thing that overlies crisis, and as I said earlier, that's the whole issue of loss. Now, how many people have actually studied about how to help people who are experiencing loss and grief? Okay, so some of this might be repeated stuff to you, but if you're going to help an individual or a family who is in crisis, it's important to understand the principles of grief and loss. So turn to page 6 with me. Before I head into that, I want to just reiterate that when it comes to ministering to families in crisis, we need to realize today that we have a twofold message in the contemporary church. And that is, we need to become an extended family for every child, and we need to teach non-fragmented families how to develop and strengthen their biological families. It's a simple mandate, yet it's so time-consuming. It really requires kind of like a buddy system. You know, the healthy, functioning family partnered with a non-healthy crisis family. Now, one thing that I want to point out to you is sometimes churches don't intervene, and churches don't really want to be working with crisis families because they feel that these families are always in crisis. Okay? There's a difference between ministering to a family in crisis and ministering to a dysfunctional family, even though there's dysfunction everywhere in all of us. But part of what I just told you about crisis is that people within 6 weeks typically can bounce back and get back to a healthy or where they started with their coping skills, right? So as you're as you're ministering to families in crisis, you need to be smart and do an assessment of where is their health line at. Okay, because sometimes when we're helping with crisis families, we expect them to get back to a healthy family scenario when they never started as a healthy family scenario. So they kind of get into a different category of dysfunctional family. Okay? And that's why the church sometimes doesn't want to touch, because it's like, no. Like your gut instinct is really right. If I attach to this set of individuals, it's going to suck me dry. Okay? But, you know, there is a way to monitor the difference between crisis families that are going through a scenario that with 6 weeks of support, they can come back to a very healthy line, and families that were never healthy. And so your intervention is going to have to start at you still give them the same things, or you monitor whether you should give them the same things like finances and meals and friendship and maybe going to court with them and those sorts of things. But it's different. Do you see the difference? The wisdom. Do you see the wisdom in assessing which is which? So I'm coming to you from a standpoint of this family, apart from, you know, some major crisis that happened, typically was able to function okay. Okay? So the twofold message to the contemporary church is you need to become an extended family for every child, and to teach non-fragmented families how to develop and strengthen their biological families. And then I give you a list of what every child needs: security, affirmation, belonging, discipline, guidance, respect, the ability to play, independence, and hope. And hopefully that can just steer you as you're staring a crisis family in the face and you're thinking, what can I do for them? Well, as you look at this list and you recognize what the kids need, and then you look at the list of what it is that the parents is saying they're needing, like babysitting, meals. Like helping people in crisis basically is about giving the basics for them to function until they can get back on track to provide that for themselves. Okay, it's simplistic, but then I want to give you a few more skills on how to actually go about doing that. So as we look at the issues of families in crisis, we see divorce, we see blended families, we see families of individuals that have special needs children. Like one of my friends has two special needs kids. And I didn't ask her permission if I could share this, but it's on Facebook. She put up this award of herself, and she put her face into this body of this actress that's receiving this award. And she says, "I just want to thank you for helping me through spring break." And she recounts in her story, like how just the respite care and the kind words of people and the support, the extra babysitting, and the helping, the bringing her coffee, and the bringing her some treats, and just the plain meat and potatoes of life that changed the whole, her whole view of the week, and also helped to give her a better ability to cope with her children. So I just thought I'd mention that. She's just been really on my mind today as I was thinking about the whole crisis thing. When you're working with people in crisis, let's look at the page 4, blended families. So divorce, as you read, yeah, maybe the caregivers are having a crisis. Sounds like she's having fun. But, divorce happens. We know that. Sometimes churches lag in their desire to help within crisis that is caused by divorce because they don't want to condone divorce. They don't want to, help it along too much. And really, in our culture, due to the prevalence of divorce, we're really robbing ourselves of an opportunity to intervene at a level where people need us the most. Okay? Divorce happens, and it brings people to crisis. That's just the bottom line. It's a great time of loss for everyone in the family. Okay? The kids suffer. Like there was a longitudinal study regarding divorce. Like you remember back in the 70s when divorce became open, they were saying, well, it's better for kids to be brought up in a home where the parents are happy together. So divorce and get happy in a relationship, and then kids are resilient. They'll just assimilate and it'll be fine. But they did a 25-year study that actually refuted that, and it says actually kids need stability, even if it's not happy. And we know that through different attachment theories and stuff that's come out. One of the things that kids need is consistent stability. And so even if you're fighting, try to stay together for the kids. That's basically now the swing in the dialogue. Now, it's a little too late for a lot of people. We're dealing with a lot of people who haven't got that message. They've gotten the message that I need to just do what I need to do, and the crisis within families have escalated through a variety of different, addictions cause crisis, domestic violence cause crisis. Like the it's not just that people are dissatisfied with their relationships. There's a lot of crap, pardon the expression, going on in homes, coming down the pipe. And so we find that divorce is very prevalent, as I read in some of the statistics. Now, when we look at blended families on page 4, there is an entire ministry that I'd encourage you to look up on the website or on their website, and it's called Winning Step Families. Okay, and I quoted them a bit, and it says when it talks about crisis, the reason so many partners in blended families feel frustrated and begin looking for help or a way out is because no one is taught how to deal with complexities, challenges, and frustrations of step family life. People who marry again or people who are in a relationship with someone who has children are typically not prepared for the disputes over parenting, money, privacy, vacations, responsibilities, boundaries, rituals, holidays, and the ways in which children act out and express their emotions. When working with a blended family, we can be of assistance by helping families work through and create a pattern of success. When I think about helping families in crisis, the reason why I'm using this data is because this is a perfect template for helping families who are in crisis, who are from a blended or divorce type of situation. As we read here, churches could set up support groups and session-type ministries that would help work through what this particular group of people say that blended families need to come to terms with in order to be successful. So as I'm talking to you, I'm trying to give you some tips as well as cover the actual what crisis is and where families are at. So I'm sorry if it seems a little bit scattered, but hopefully you can link it all together in your mind and come up with some good tidbits to take away with you. So when it comes to blended families in crisis, it's important that as a church we get on board and be part of the people who help to inform them about what it is going to be like for them in marriage and in parenting these children that are displaced from their biological nuclear family. It's just, a lot of them are just plain angry. And I think a lot of parents who are in a blended or going to participate in a blended family scenario, they know what they need, but they don't necessarily know what their children need. And they know what they want because they're in love, but they don't necessarily know, or they don't necessarily want to attend to what it is that their kids need. So that's where the church can be helpful. Okay? I was meeting with some child today of her dad is a widower, or not today, it was last week. Her dad's a widower. He's been a widower for a year, and he's dating someone, and he's already talking about when he should ask the question. Like, he's trying to involve the children in the decision. He's trying to be a good dad, but that set her into crisis. And it's then set the family into crisis because she's in crisis, and it's set her brother into crisis, and they just don't know how to handle it. And so a little later we're going to talk about how to work with people with grief. Okay, because if crisis is about loss, and if crisis brings people to a point of really struggling and to a point of grief and a real sense of loss, you also need to know about how to handle that, right? So I do have notes in there. That's why I created notes for you. You can take this home and read it at your leisure as well. But so one of the things about blended families is to help them become informed about the pressures and the struggles. Another thing is to acknowledge, help them to acknowledge and mourn the loss. Okay? Like, there's a lot of loss that goes along with divorce. There's a lot of loss that goes, of course, if you're a widower like this man is, if you're a child where you've lost a parent. Like, I worked through that with our own family. My brother, 8 years ago, his wife passed away from breast cancer. She was 38. She struggled with it for 2.5 years, left a 14-year-old, a 17-year-old, and an 18-year-old. And so talk about crisis. And you know what? Unfortunately, either these crises don't end. Today, I was talking to him about he's dating this lady, and how does he doesn't have to handle the kids. The kids are okay with it, but how does he handle the mother-in-law of the deceased, who's still very close to the family? So you see, and these all are potential crises for people, right? That we as ministers of the gospel and as Sunday school teachers, and as care workers within the church, become the first response. You know, they get off the phone, they come to church, and you say, what's going on? Oh, well, they either don't want to talk about it, or they want to talk about it, and you become embroiled in a scenario that is quite critical. And as I said earlier, your response can lessen their need for long-term counseling down the road. Listening, being there, attending to them, it's all important. Helping them to mourn their loss, as I was just saying. Another thing that's important when you're working with blended families who are in crisis is to help to teach them realistic expectations. Realistic expectations, like it's this particular Winning Step Families Ministry says it may take 4 to 7 years to go through the stages of step family development. 4 to 7 years. Like, do we even know that? Right? We just think, no, he loves her, she loves him, he's got 3 kids, she's got 3 kids, they're going to get together and have a really great time, right? Because the more the merrier. Brady Bunch, how about a dozen, like Better by the Dozen or whatever that movie is, you know, where they move into the lighthouse, you know, and it's supposed to be really great. And then there's that other one, Cheaper by the Dozen, that's what it is. Or those TLC Learning Channel things, right, where she's on what, number 17? 18, right. And they're doing it, and they're having a great time. Why am I not able to have a great time? You see, realistic expectations. So basically, the church has to be therapists. No, I'm just kidding. But in many ways, ready and willing and desirous to be there on the first responder home front, which is financially, supporting with meals, supporting with encouragement, supporting with help, good information. Good information is worth its weight in gold. They call it insight. If you can have insight about your problems, you're on your way to getting better, right? So realistic expectations, being unified as a couple, is also something that the church, if they're wanting to be helpful, needs to promote in a relationship. Also an understanding about what satisfactory step relationships look like. So in other words, more information. This particular group of people said it's more satisfactory for step-parents to define themselves as aunts or uncles. Like, you don't go around, I'm your auntie, I'm your uncle. But you have an expectation that you're not going to be that person's mother. You're not going to be that person's father, and you act accordingly. There's also the ability for the church, as we try to minister to families, to help them set up good rituals, or even understand that it's important for them to have new family rituals, new traditions. And then also just give them, as I said before, the support, the financial. I'll never forget staring in the eyes just last week of a girl who was giving a lady who was giving a presentation on divorce, and then another one giving a presentation on domestic violence. And she said, if both of them agreed, if the church just would have come and talked to me, it would have been helpful. If the church would have given my mother more money so we wouldn't have been so destitute. Now, doesn't that sound a little bit like what, Child and Family is supposed to be doing? But have you noticed in our culture that they're needing us more and more as the church to step in and help in these crisis scenarios? It's no longer, the church is here and we just do this sort of thing. Not that it's ever been that way. I remember when my dad was on the church board, them trying to discern how much to give away in terms of benevolency for people. So I'm not dissing the church at all. We've done a good job. But within this culture of how I've defined it and how the statistics define it, unfortunately, we're being called upon more and more to give more resources to people who are having to start over because they're in crisis, give more support in terms of childcare, meals, that phone call. Like in our church, the children's ministry individual calls every parent every week to see how they're doing. And especially, and of course she gets a lot of messages, right? Hello, leaving. But she makes sure that she gets in contact with all the single parents, and she makes sure that she gets in contact with all the new mothers. Because she's trying to alleviate crisis by doing that, right? A lot of pre-work can be done so that people don't even have to get into a place of crisis, right? It's kind of interesting. As I was walking in and out of this door getting ready, it says, our child to worker ratio is now full. We welcome you to join our class with your child. And I thought, okay, that's a cool sign, but it's telling me that there needs to be more workers. Okay? And it's like, ministering to families in crisis, unfortunately, has the same difficulty. There needs to be more workers. Because the issues, as you can tell, because I've been like going at it for 35 minutes already, the issues are not simple. They're very, very intricate. So I go from that to a whole bunch of information that I've included in the packet, starting on page 7, about grief and loss, and how to work with people who are suffering from grief and loss. And I want us to adapt it to crisis as well, because crisis is about loss, okay? So we look at the stages of grieving, shock, denial, isolation, stage 2, anger, stage 3, bargaining, stage 4, depression, stage 5, resolution and acceptance. Think about a family or think about an individual that you have helped through a crisis. Didn't you see all this at work? These stages of grieving were developed to explain the stages of a person who was dying, okay, and have been adapted to define grieving. But I propose that when someone's going through a crisis, these same stages apply. Yep. So as you see that in front of you, and as you have thought about someone in the recent past that you've helped, let's look at some things to do and not to do, okay? This, on page 9, there's a second model for the journey of grief. I find it like you have this one model by Kubler-Ross that is in front of you. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. But this second one by Bess Bailey, for me, kind of describes it in another way. We follow the experience of loss with protest. Like how many families in crisis, they can't believe it. They don't want it. They are rejecting it. This can't be it. Like I was just talking to this a young lady this past week, and it's just a young family. But what happened was they moved out here from Ontario. She wanted to get some paper done with the insurance on their car, and it didn't happen in a timely fashion. Her husband had an accident and hit some ice and was going really slow, praise God, and hit a guy and broke his leg. And so now, even though they're this young, fledgling family, young, they're in this crisis because the insurance company will cover it, but then they're going to sue them for breach of contract. And so already they're thinking about their alternatives, right? And they're getting good information, which is what you need in a crisis to get you back into control. But the bottom line is they're probably going to, if this goes through, going to have to declare bankruptcy at the age of like 19, right? So, you just never know what's going to walk into your office, right? Like, how many people, or walk into your kitchen and have people say, hey, this is what, or get you out there for coffee, and they lower the bomb, right? This is what's happening, right? So when it comes to the journey of grief, you've got the protest, the shock, the numbness, the confusion, the anger, and then there's the searching. How can I get through this? And then there's the despair that comes in, the agony, the anguish, the depression. Like she said, she cried for days, okay, just days about it. The slow thinking, like how many people come to you, I just can't do what I was doing. Like, I just can't do anything. So that's where the bringing the meals, asking if you can make any phone calls, if you can do any research for them, if you can take the kids and take them to the, I was going to say the mall, that's not that fun for kids, take them to Chuck E. Cheese, you know? Like those are the types of intervention things as you're ministering to people that are in crisis. As time passes, reorganization eventually happens where they get, again, their bursts of energy, their intermittent interest, the indifference, the fatigue leaves. And I've given you some information there on how long it takes to bounce back, and you can read that at your leisure. The next thing I've given you when it comes to helping people in crisis and in grief and in loss is this particularly pertains to death, but you can adapt it to anything. We need to be, I'm at number 3 on page 11. We need to be prepared to share words of comfort from Scripture or poetry and through prayer. It's amazing how, if you just email someone, I'm praying for you, or you Facebook them, or you, like how that can help to restore the equilibrium in a crisis, okay? It's about restoring their equilibrium, getting them back in control, giving them a bright spot in their day, right? It's simple, but yet sometimes it can really evade us if we don't think about it. We need to try to accept and understand the individual where they are at. We must make sure that we are hearing where they are at, that we're actually seriously listening to them, okay? We like to put our agenda on people. I know none of you do, but I like to put my agenda on people, okay? And it's just not helpful, okay? And especially in crisis, it's not helpful. Because you might not know this, but there's a rule in counseling, and that is the power to change is not in the people helper's words. It's in the person's that you're helping's words. So in other words, I can say all I want to them, but until they say, oh, I see how it is, I need to do this, it's not going to make any difference. You know, you can say, this is what you need to do, and they can go, this is what I need to do. But until they go, oh, I think what I need to do is this, it doesn't have the same power, right, for change. So you got to remember to hear where they're at so that you can endeavor to minister to them in a correct way. We must remember to give them time. We must recruit support for them. Okay? Like, part of being part of a church is that we're in this machine, all hands on deck, or that's what we hope for, right? That's what we're trying to build by going to these conferences, is this team, right? I heard that this morning. This team of people that can be jolly on the spot. Like I tell you, when we were in crisis over having our first child, part of it was because it was like 52 and a half hours labor, by then forceps and an emergency C-section, and I was so out of it, and Alpha had been up the 52 hours, and he goes, yeah, you at least got drugs. And, you know, that was his response to the whole crisis. You at least got drugs. And I broke his finger by squeezing it. I felt really bad, but not that bad at the time. And, you know, there's all we needed, like at that time, like we were in crisis. I'm telling you, we were in crisis. I had a few complications afterwards, too. And it just took my sister coming in and holding the baby and being there to get up and take care of the baby for like 3 hours to put us back to a place of greater equilibrium. It doesn't take a lot. It just took 3 hours. She was able to go home, shower, and eat. You know? It's the little things when a crisis happens. It's the caring, the support. It's the little things. You can read there, I need to help with final arrangements, but basically, you need to help with every arrangement. And when it comes to crisis with, like, say someone's trying to escape a domestic violence scenario, or someone's having to move out because there is a divorce, and they're either being kicked out or they're just leaving or whatever. Those are final arrangements. Help them move. Help them find a place. Do some calling around. Help them find a place to rent. Like, I was helping someone this summer. They were in crisis. They had to get out of where they were. And I was their legs and eyes. I took my camera around and I took pictures of every little nook and cranny and sent it to them so that they'd be able to see, is this where I want to live? Is this where it's about being the hands and the feet of people that are in too much of a crisis to do it themselves. They're basically trying to cope and get out of the scenario that they're in that has become dangerous. And they're not, they can't do it all. So basically, the church needs to break it down and strategize. What is it that I can do? The grieving person or the person in crisis, I would say, needs a safe place, needs safe people, and safe situations. Okay? Well, I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, you know what, I really wish that when my mom had been going through a divorce, that the church didn't look at us and run. That they would have just embraced us, and they already felt bad about themselves. Yeah. They already felt, well, it's amazing. You know, when you go through emotional trauma, you can feel like the biggest set of pond scum on earth, and that you've got no right to live. And that, like, for kids that are in these traumatic or crisis situations, because they're so egocentric, in other words, the world revolves around them, and they're the reason why everything happens, they take it and they say, well, what did I do to cause this? Okay? What did I do to cause this? So if you can take a kid out for ice cream in the middle of a crisis, you're giving them life-giving breath for years. Like, the saddest thing to me working at Summit is being the first responder to a whole bunch of people who are survivors of divorce. The generation of kids that are coming to Bible college are not from the nuclear family situation. They're from divorce situations. They get into these scenarios, and you look at them and you say, okay, your response to this event was like you're 13. When did the divorce happen? I don't say that out loud. And they're like, when I was 12. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. You know, there's something to be said about you stop growing emotionally where there's been a crisis or a trauma. And a lot of the 18, 19-year-olds at our school are still functioning at a 13-year-old level, those that have been the product of crisis and trauma where there wasn't quality intervention. Okay? So you're the next potential force or team that can try to start implementing some of these types of first responder activities, the kindness, the financial support, the taking students out that you know are from a hurting situation, the setting up of benevolency funds, the promoting, we need to treat these kids like they're gold, especially the ones that are coming from crisis situations. I quoted it at the very beginning. It saves years of therapy after. Sometimes, like, I haven't even gotten into the abuse type of crisis yet, and I probably won't today. But it's like your first response to them telling their story can dictate how it is that they can function 10 years later. If you believe them, if you walk with them in a systematic manner, if you know your policy to protect of the church, and you follow it, and you go correctly to your the person who the specified mandate or the mandated reporter, that's what I'm trying to say. If you make yourself aware of all of the things that need to happen in these types of crises, you can save people so much stress. Because what happens in crisis and in trauma is there's actual pathways in the brain that are created so that the next time a stressful event comes up, if that last stressful event wasn't handled well, they're going to immediately go to the bad point in the brain, and it's going to be an even worse scenario in their head, even if the actual problem that they're facing isn't as critical. So our response is very important. Now I added page 13 so that you would know if a person is in the grieving mode through crisis or trauma, or I'll just say crisis, not trauma, through crisis or grief, when to refer, okay, when to get some additional help for them. I added it there. And then on page 14, lost do's and don'ts. Lost do's. Do send a card. Do write a note. Do make a phone call. Do say I am sorry for your loss. Do actively listen. Reflectively. Page 15 is just a little bit of a counseling technique thing. It's called the solar stance. You know, you sit squarely. You sit openly, you lean a little forward, you have good eye contact, and you're relaxed about the conversation you're having. Page 16, more lost do's. Do let them cry. Do let silence be okay. Do something, okay? Do something. When you know someone's in crisis, like someone at our school just had, a couple of people just had operations. It would be negligent of me to think, oh, they're okay. You got to send a card. You got to send an email. You got to tell them that you care. Because we're part of the family of God that's ministering to families in crisis. And each of these persons were representatives of families. Do let silences be okay. Do offer help with phone calls, and that's directly related to funerals, but phone calls can be anything, to lawyers, to, changing their address with people, changing, like just whatever it is that they need. Do offer resources, do offer like books and stuff, but also planning if there's anything like that. Do ask how you might help. Do respect the griever's wishes. Do be aware of markers. Like, do you realize even with divorce, like that, I remember my sister, she was in this terrible relationship. They were only together like 3 years. He was in and out of prison. She met him at a coffee house, one of those really nice girls that are just there to serve Jesus, and he was a new convert, and they got together, and it was so passionate and great, and then they slept together, and so the uncle who's a pastor has to get them married, and so he gets them married. Didn't even tell my parents that they were getting married. Anyways, and so then, he's in and out of jail, but he's a terrible abuser and everything, and so she's only with him for like 3 years, just enough to have 2 children. So she's a single parent her entire life. She was lucky because she had her family supporting. The church was very supportive. But the bottom line is, 20 years later, when the guy comes and says, I want to marry another woman, I need a divorce. She was bummed out for like a year. Well, I have a failed marriage. I was like, that's a marker. That's a marker for her.
Yeah.
And so she remembers it every year. Doesn't make sense to us, right? Like the marker was like 20 years earlier when the guy was gone, right? But to her, they're still functioning, and so it's like it might not make sense to you, but if you listen to what's important to them, it and act accordingly, right? That's what we do. Do suggest counseling if books aren't working, and do suggest some loss and support groups. And then there's that whole other element of, what sort of groups are you going to start in your church, right? Divorce recovery for kids. There is a saying in counseling, and that is, if the parents are okay, the kids will be okay. Well, because we know that most parents aren't okay, and let's define what okay is when they're going through a crisis, and a lot of their personal energy to nurture their children is caught up in their own, how it is that they're working out their own stuff. Kids are just left behind. So if you can give them more attention through these groups, through different care type of groups, that's an incredible resource that you can have in your churches for ministering to families in crisis. Helping takes time, personal strength, wisdom to know what to say and what not to say, compassion, I don't have this written down, empathy, lots of patience, good boundaries. It's just a big job. I have on page 18 what not to do when there's a loss. Don't say, and then you can read for yourself there. Do not talk the griever out of his or her feelings. Do not abandon him or her for aggression. They might seem really weird to you, but that is their point of crisis. And it's not like you have to agree with everything that it is that's going on in their head, but to be there with them during the journey is very important. Do not make promises you do not intend to keep. That's huge. Okay? Remember, grief is not the problem, it's the solution. If you don't grieve, it's going to come back to bite you. If these people don't work through their crisis as well, guaranteed it's going to end up being worse down the road. Like, how many of us have known people who didn't grieve, divorced individuals who did not grieve or look at or look through their past relationship and try to learn from it and stuff, and within 2 months of their divorce are dating someone else? Like, it's not helpful to them, their children. I can see why, we get a little rattled with that. It's important to grieve. Remember, when grief is viewed as something to be avoided, trouble may start. Remember, unrecognized, unhealed grief leaves festering wounds. And lots of stress-related stuff goes with that. Remember, when you adopt coping mechanisms designed to hide your feelings and numb your pain, you delay the process of healing. Okay? And unfinished grief is a powerful source of distress. Now, I'm supposed to stop, and you guys are supposed to ask questions. Did you know that? Now on page 19, what you can say with a child who has lost a loved one. Okay, now this pertains to death, okay, because families in crisis, you think death and divorce and all that stuff. But it can also be a good template for what to say and what not to say, even in divorce scenarios and in other type of loss scenarios. Believe it or not, some people say that the deceased is sleeping, it's not really dead, God took the deceased, gone to be with Jesus. And those seem to create complications for children, because children are black and white thinkers, right? They're not, they can't assimilate this type of data. So I gave you a list on page 20 of things to say, okay, and I hope that that's helpful. It's never easy to talk to a child about loss anyways, okay? But that might be some starting off points. And then the last page is what can the church do with domestic violence scenarios, which is definitely a crisis. Create a safe environment for the battered, listen and believe, provide financial, physical support where necessary. In other words, go to court with them if this is helpful. Re-educate abusers who feel biblically justified. Discipline abusers who feel biblically justified. Talk about it in many venues of the church, prayer meetings. It needs to be labeled as sin. Announcements can be made from the pulpit regarding support groups and available safe houses. Church leaders need to examine their theology and think of what they can do to prevent it. For example, at a junior high level, begin to teach the characteristics of healthy relationships and good self-concepts, just like Chris Luff does in his youth group. But that's all preventative to crisis, right? If we as a church take on the mandate to teach what appropriate relationship is like, what good family values is like, how to work through, how to choose good mates, how to, like, let's think preventatively, right? Instead of after the fact. Because, you know what? Why do you think God said he doesn't like divorce? Is it because he doesn't like divorced people? No. He doesn't like divorce because of what it starts in the child's life, what it puts there, what it rips them of, the nurturing, the stability, he doesn't like it because of all of the ramifications that happen within the individual's lives that unfortunately, due to situations, take those steps. That's what he doesn't like. He doesn't like, why does, let's start this one. Why does Satan love abuse? Because if he can get someone at a very young age believing wrong things about themselves, having wrong things wrapped around the core of their identity, he knows he's got them licked for the rest of their lives. But thank the Lord that Jesus came and he breaks those chains. But it takes a lot of effort to unravel what happens in a child's life. It takes a lot of effort. So the Lord hates these things because that's not his way. And the enemy loves these things because his work's easy then. Okay? So we're the first responders. We're the crisis busters. We're his hands extended. And I hope that these are some good tools that you can take away with you today. Any questions?
I had a question regarding kind of what you talked about at the beginning and that process of not creating a codependency or that difference of somebody that's just standing
in a crisis versus being dysfunctional?
Yeah. What do you do and what are your recommendations as far as boundaries and those kind of situations and how do you kind of transition that?
Well, if you have a family who's in crisis, typically they will be out of crisis, as I said, like within about 6 weeks, as you kick into gear the support, whether that's financial, physical, spiritual, emotional, okay? But when you have the family that's dysfunctional, like we're all dysfunctional, but like highly dysfunctional, they would be put into a different category by virtue of to receive these, this is just off the top of my head, okay, to continue to receive financial support, we want you to go and see a counselor for this period of time. See how they respond to actually going and learning better parenting skills or learning better relationship skills. Like, it would be like a two-level intervention there. You've got the crisis level intervention, which is support and love and being there for them. And then you've got the, okay, let's try to teach you a few different things. See how willing and teachable you are. And I've worked in churches where they have support groups for people who have basically been birthed in dysfunction and are highly dysfunctional. And, people love learning how to live life better. Now you've got those that don't want to live life better, and then those are just ones where basically at some point your pastor or somebody's going to need, a board member will need to confront them and say, look, this is the level of care that we can give you, and this is what we want. This is a process we want to start in your life. If you will be faithful to this process, then this support will continue. If you're not faithful to this process, then we're going to have to find some other way to help you, but maybe not just always financially. And because some people get totally burnt out. Like I had a young man came to me last year, and he'd been helping this gentleman out for years. Like, this guy's a Bible college student, and he's helping. So he goes, this guy will phone me periodically and ask for money. Like, how long do I do this? And he'd been doing it. The guy was like 25 years old, and the guy had been already doing it for 10 years. Well, let me just tell you a little something about boundaries. That's not the role that you're supposed to be having in this individual's life. And so the sooner you can say no to this individual, the better. So, yes.
When you're talking about being the first responder, like page 14 talks about food. So is that